Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. If you're new to the series, this is a Build It With Me series and I am walking through how to create a brand new web application from scratch. It's going to involve Java, AWS, infrastructure and code, and if you need to get refreshed on where we're at to this point, go back to the prior videos and watch through those and you'll get caught up in no time. In our last video, we sniffed out some network traffic to Robinhood to recover some payload information that we'll use for our authentication call to Robinhood. Robinhood is a brokerage company, and we're using their API to do different calls, to do buys, sells, things of that nature for our application. This is a auto trading application. And so we should be ready to write some real code. As we go through this, I have an idea of the layout I want for the code and classes and things of that nature. But as we get into it, I'm sure it's going to change over time, and there'll be plenty of refactoring and cleaning things up, moving things around, massaging classes, things of that nature. So as long as you watch through all these videos, you'll massage that and refactor along with me. What else? So in the last video, or a couple of videos ago, we walked through this API that Mr. Conrad Weiser had put together. It's a dead project, but it'll give us an idea on different calls that we can make and different payloads. I zoomed this in a bit more, so please let me know in the comments below if this is zoomed in far enough or if you want me to make it a little bit bigger. I've been trying to work on different settings like that to make watching these videos a little bit easier for you guys. So if we take a peek at the authentication class, we will need this client ID, and in the previous episode when we seen the traffic to Robinhood uses that same client ID string, so that was good to find out. And a big part of it is going to be using this authorized without multi-factor class. So he puts all the required fields as URL parameters, says media type, does a post, and gets back a string. So this token.class is just a, I can go there real quick, class that only has a string field called access token. So we will try to not do the same exact code, copy and paste, but use this as a basis for what we're going to do. And so, getting into the code, I'm going to do my best to do a process called Tdd Test-Driven Development. The idea is you write your unit test before writing any code, production code rather. The idea is you write a failing test case, then you write a passing test case, and then you refactor to clean up anything that you did. And then you would then go on to the next step, make that passing test case then fail, let's add the next piece to it, or add a new test case, then make your production code pass that test case, refactor, rinse, repeat, and go on and on. Doing so, we should have a nice clean application that's fully covered by unit tests. If we make any changes and compile our code, we can see if our unit tests and assumptions are still true throughout the application. So it's just a really nice way to speed up development after you understand how it works, and make a nice, clean, quality application. To that end, we are going to start by creating a new package. This is going to go under web. We'll say client. This client calls Robinhood is the client we are making. Sure, so that seems fine. Actually, we'll do one more package under here for authorization. So anything in this package would be authorization calls to get tokens, log in, log out, things of that nature. So for us, we'll do for our tests, retrieve token test. As far as convention goes, any class ends in test will be run as a unit test. Any class ends with IT runs as an integration test. Those are two separate plugins, Failsafe and Surefire, the two plugins, and it's packaged with Maven by default, so you don't need to include those unless you want to pull them in and make specific changes to how it's configured. But just convention, anything in test at the end will run as a unit test. So we'll create this class. So first we need to write a failing test case. So private retrieve token, retrieve token. So this class no longer compiles because retrieve token class does not exist. So this is now failing to compile, it's a failing test case. So let's remedy that by creating our classes. So this is under web already, client, Robinhood, authorization, new class, retrieve token. And let me get this zoomed in a bit more to be easier to read. There we go. Alt enter. Let's see if we can find this class. It'd be helpful if I can spell it correctly. Alright, so our class now compiles, so we can move on. So we have a class. At test is an annotation to say this method is a test method. So the method that we'll call, we'll say, is invoke. So I want to call retrieve token dot invoke. This method does not exist, and so we will create the method. Public void invoke. Doesn't do anything quite yet, but now this passes. And real quick, we'll do equals new retrieve token. So that way we don't have a null pointer. So run the test case, and this should pass because everything exists and doesn't really do anything quite yet. But should be a passing test case for now. And as we go through this, I'll be adding in more things as we need them. So one of the ideas of test-driven development is you don't put a lot of stuff in until you need them in your application. For instance, I know this is going to be with Spring, so I can do the @service annotation now, but for right now we don't need any Spring integrations. We just need to create the class, send a request to Robinhood, get a response back, and go from there. So it passed, green, great. The next thing we need, let's think, we will probably need to pass in some sort of payload. That would be our login credentials. For now, I'll probably hard code things. And then once we have them passing, we do our refactor step, we'll move things around to be cleaner. So for now we call invoke. So what is this going to do? So are going to use a REST template. So REST template is a Spring library that allows HTTP requests. So gets, posts, puts, so on and so forth. So that is going to be the library we use to make these requests. So I need REST template. So make it private. Nobody needs to access this guy. Alt-Enter to import that in our class. And again, this is going to be managed by Spring in the near future, but for now we don't need to worry about that. So for this class, we'll just create one on the fly when it starts up. So I know I want to what's the next thing I need to do? So I want to be able to mock this REST template. So for unit tests, the idea of mocking is if you don't want to actually call out to a third-party service or another part of your application or a database, wherever it might be, you set up a mock object, pass that into your class, or inject it in some way to your class, and then whenever your class uses that object, it will return back whatever you tell it to return back. It will not actually call out to a service. It will not actually call out to a database. It will have everything be mocked and stubbed. And that's what we want for this REST template. So instead of creating it like this, I'm going to pass it in, I believe. There's a few ways to create mocked objects, but what I'm going to do is use run with JUnit. That's not right. What is this? It's deprecated, so we'll use Spring Runner, I believe, is be fine, but we need to include that in here. So we need Spring Runner, and what this is doing is uses annotations to go in and set up different mocks and different objects for you when your test class runs. So Spring starter test Maven latest release, because that's usually the most stable. Copy that, paste it in as a dependency, wait for a moment for that to find and download dependency. Import, Control-Alt-O will clean up your imports and remove any unused imports. So we're going to go ahead and run this again. I have a feeling we need to update our JUnit version to be compatible with that. So it requires JUnit 4.12 or higher. So we will go back and just see what the latest JUnit version is. And for me, just easiest to search on Google. 4.13. I'll write that dependency like so. Get that lined up a bit better. Do a little bit of cleanup. Run this again. We shouldn't see any errors now. Excellent. All right, so where are we at on time? 16 minutes. I'm gonna do a few more minutes for this video. So there's a couple ways to make mock objects, as I mentioned before. The easiest is just using annotations. So @mock private REST template. And a personal preference for mine, I'll always prefix the variable with mock. And that way later in my test class here, I can easily tell which variables I'm using as a mocked objects. Okay. So then here, I want to pass in mock REST template. This no longer compiles because I'm passing in an object to a constructor that does not exist. So let's make a constructor, public retrieve token REST template, this dot REST template will equal REST template that pass in. And there we go. And just to make sure, let's do a system.out.println is REST template null plus REST template equals null. So we're going to do a print statement. It's going to concatenate the result of this expression. This is going to return back true or false. It will return true if this is null. It will return false if it is not null. And this will see if we are passing our mock REST template successfully into our class. So run this and we'll see the output. Looks like there's a little bit of a lag too in this video, so apologies for that. Alright, go down. Here we go. It comes back true. So let's figure out why that is. So my guess is this object is created first before this @mock comes into the picture. So before the Spring Runner creates this mocked object and injects it in here, this is probably already created with a null object. So let's fix that. So one thing we can do is create an app before annotated class, or not class, but method. This is from JUnit. This says before each test case is ran, so each method that has an @test annotation, do whatever setup is needed. It's always public and void. My preference for method name is setup. And so each time each time a test method is ran, is going to call this statement and create a new retrieve token class with that mocked object. So that seems fine. Going to insert a few empty lines there. And now it comes back false. So now we know two things. We know that this assignment is correct, is populating, or it's giving this a real object. And we know that our order here is correct, that it created a mocked object before passing it in to the class. So now we have a mocked object to work with inside here as far as our unit tests are concerned. And let's see on time. We have a little bit longer. So what is the next thing we need to do? So we're calling invoke. We have our REST template object. So let's take a quick peek at which method on REST template we're going to use. So REST template dot. These are all of the methods available for us to use. A lot of them are separated by what operation you're doing. So get, post, put, so on and so forth. Each one of these has specific things that it does, so you can pass in different things based on what your need is. A much more generic option is exchange, and that is probably the one we're going to use. So if we look at exchange, it has a few options. So the first parameter is going to be the URL that you're going to invoke. The second parameter is the HTTP method. So that's if you're doing a put or a get or a post, so on and so forth. The HTTP entity is the request object that you're sending. So for us, if we have a peek back at this repository, we're going to send in an object with these URL parameters. Is that correct? URL parameter will go in the URL, so that should go, nope, probably in the first one. So we'll see if we need the entity to have anything. It might just be an empty object. So we'll look into that. And then the next argument in most of these is the class that is going to be a response object. So when it responds back, you can pass in a data object representation of that payload, like JSON payload, and it'll translate that JSON into your class. So I believe that is the one that we will need. So what's the best way to go about doing this? So I'm going to deviate a little bit from TDD. So I want to see if a proof of concept would work first, and then I'll go back and mock out everything and write test for it. And so I'm not going to mock this anymore. I'm going to just create a new REST template object. So this will be a real live object. So when we call exchange with the URL, it will actually call out that URL and get stuff back. So let's run this again. It should still come back false for this statement. So it still has an object. We created one. We're passing that in. So that should be just fine. Excellent. All right. So I think I'm gonna call that for a video. We're coming up on 30 minutes. I want to keep these 30 minutes or less. So just a quick recap. We started with getting some structure for our application. We have some package structure. We're trying to use some TDD practices by writing unit tests along with our production code. We're going to deviate a little bit from that to make sure that our first call will succeed to Robinhood. We have this unit test case class that we can just invoke and call and have it run our code for us. We went through quite a bit of this, and when we started making this retrieve token class with an invoke method to invoke the Robinhood API. In our next video, I'm going to continue on this path. Hopefully by the end of the next video, we'll have a live call to Robinhood and get back a response. The first one will be just dummy data, so an invalid username and password, and that should come back with a probably 401, so you're not authorized to come back, but it should still invoke the endpoint and get back a response and not have it be a 305 or a 404 or any other status, but it should be a 401. If that works, then I'll figure out a way to make my own credentials private. That way I don't show them to everybody, because I don't want you all logging into my Robinhood account. But we'll see if I can get a token back. So that would be a really great next step. So thank you all for watching, and I'm going to end this video here. If you like the series, let me know. Post some comments below if you have any questions. If something doesn't work right for you, I'll try to reply to all of those. Like, subscribe, bell notification, all that fun stuff. And if you can let me know if the Zoom is good for you guys, I want to make sure you all can follow along without any difficulties. So thank you all, and until next time, bye.